Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I genuinely appreciate you being with me. Um, I completely, totally forgot to mention yesterday how over the weekend I had the fantastic privilege of speaking to a small group of preterists in Huntsville, Texas. I was down there actually for a great big swap meet at Conroe, which is just north, 15, 20 miles, maybe 30 of Houston. And then Huntsville is immediately north of that. And they were kind enough to ask me to speak while I was down there for the swap meet. And I was just thrilled to death to do so. We had a fantastic time. Pardon me. We got together on Saturday night, had a meal together. I spoke at their church on Sunday morning. It's kind of an interesting group. The church is not itself preterist. The minister sure said some interesting, fascinating things that I wanted to jump up and say, run with that, run with that. But nonetheless, uh, had a fantastic time down there in Huntsville, Texas. I think we had 12, maybe 14. I don't know. I didn't actually do a count. But nonetheless, it was a fantastic time, and I want to thank them. I know many of them watch my videos, so I want to thank them for the invitation because it honestly was a great time of encouragement to me. Like I told them, I don't get an opportunity to speak publicly anymore. Ever since COVID hit, I have virtually eliminated all airplane travel. I've turned down numbers and numbers of invitations to speak in different places, having to fly. And I said, no, no, I just don't feel comfortable with that, given my history of severe respiratory infections. And so, I mean, after all, my wife and I are just now getting over it. Had it this lingering effect now. This is going on 3.5 weeks. So anyway, the opportunity to kind of unload some things that I have been studying. Particularly, I shared with them Daniel 9, 24 to 27, the Septuagint, and the end of the millennium, the end of the 70 weeks. Absolutely fantastic stuff, and I'm currently writing on this. So anyway, thank you again for joining me this morning. We are continuing our summary of what we have seen in our study of the Olivet Discourse. We have been focused on Matthew chapter 24 over the last two videos. We've been focused on Matthew 24, verse 32 and verse 33. There's a whole lot more that I could say about these, but it's only been one video, I guess, that we focused on those verses. But I pointed out that Jesus said, learn the parable of the fig tree. When it puts forth its leaves, then you know that summer is nigh. Therefore, when you see all of these things, know that it is nigh. Now, what is the it? Well, the closest antecedent is the coming of the Lord on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. But here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. When Jesus predicted the fall of Jerusalem in AD, which was to occur and did occur in AD 70, the apostles immediately reacted and asked him, tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your parousia and the end of the age? That's the question. We are told constantly that the apostles were confused. How do we know they were confused? Well, because they were confused on other occasions. Been corresponding on YouTube with a gentleman who says, well, yeah, they were asking about the end of time. How do we know that? Because they used the word parousia, and the word parousia refers to his final coming. The word erchomai applies to AD 70. Well, that's fallacious. It's linguistically wrong. No justification for it whatsoever. The point of fact is the apostles linked Jesus' parousia with the impending judgment on Jerusalem and the temple. So the necessary question is, if and since the apostles made that connection between that impending destruction of the city and temple and Christ's parousia and the end of the age, then were they wrong? Were they confused? And if they were not confused to make that connection, then guess what? That means that Christ's parousia and the end of the age was in fact directly connected with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And that, of course, destroys futurism. Ultimately, definitively destroys futurism. Let me repeat this. If the apostles were not wrong to connect the Lord's coming, his parousia, and the end of the age with the impending destruction of Jerusalem, then guess what? Futurism is wrong. Pure, flat, dead wrong. So when people try to say, oh, well, yeah, they were wrong, they were confused, they have to prove that. And no one's been able to give any evidence whatsoever to prove that the apostles were confused or simply ignorant. Now, back to the issue at hand. The apostles had asked for, tell us what shall the sign be? Now some former preterists say, we'll only ask for one sign. That must be the abomination of desolation. We have here, ladies and gentlemen, a classic case of heterosis. What is heterosis? Heterosis is when a speaker or a writer uses a singular to refer to plurals. The singular does not exclude the plural when heterosis is being used. By the way, that can be used conversely. Okay? A plural can be used to speak of a singular. Hebrews chapter 9 is a classic example of this, but I don't have time to go into this. If you want more on it, just contact me and I'll explain it to you. So, when Jesus gave the completion of the world mission and the abomination of desolation as the sign of the end, he wasn't violating the apostles' question at all. He was expanding on it. But here's the really key point. What shall be the sign of your coming, parousia, and end of the age? I have asked you to consider this before, ladies and gentlemen, and this is, after all, our summary. What age did that temple represent? You know, it's absolutely amazing. Now, keep in mind, at one time, I took the traditional view. At one time, I believed that the apostles were actually asking about the end of time, the end of the Christian age. Now, why? Why? Ask yourself why the apostles would think about the end of the Christian age when Jesus predicted the end of that temple, which did not in any way, shape, form, or fashion represent, symbolize the new covenant age. There's a total disconnect here, ladies and gentlemen. It makes no sense whatsoever. For instance, to argue as John Calvin did in his commentary on the Olivet Discourse. He said, well, the apostles were clearly wrong. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But the apostles could not imagine the destruction of that temple unless it were linked to the end of time. Seriously? This is a massive logical and exegetical failure. How do I know that? Well, let me ask you. Were the apostles aware that the Solomonic temple was destroyed in BC 586? Yeah. They had a yearly feast, they had 4 fasts, but they had a yearly feast to commemorate that, I should say, a fast. So every single year, the Jews had 4 fasts to commemorate the fall of Jerusalem. And those 4 fasts were at the different junctions, the different major times of the siege in 586 BC. Zechariah chapter 9 develops it. So we're supposed to believe now that the apostles could not imagine the destruction of the Herodian temple unless it would be at the end of time, although they were acutely aware that the Solomonic temple was destroyed and it was not the end of time. Where's the logic in this? Where's the connection in this? That is a humongous assumption that has no merit. So let me ask you again. To those of you who claim that the apostles had in mind the destruction of planet Earth, a literal, physical, bodily coming of Jesus at the end of the Christian age. Point number 1. What age did that temple that Jesus had just predicted, not one stone shall be left standing on top of another? What age did that specific temple represent? Folks, once again, it did not represent the Christian age. No way, no shape, no form, no how. You know how I know that? Because point number 1, the Christian age has no end. Do you catch the power of that simple statement? The Christian age has no end. In Isaiah chapter 9, 6 and following, unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The kingdom shall be upon his shoulders, the rule and the reign. And the Lord God shall give him the kingdom of his father David, and of the increase of his government and of peace there will be an end to it in 5,000 or 6,000 years. It'll come to an end. Of the increase of his government, there will be no end. What is the increase of his government? Evangelism. Of the increase of his government, no end. If the Jews wanted to express endlessness, guess what? They said no end. They didn't necessarily say forever, in perpetuity, everlasting. No, they said no end. In Ephesians 3, 20 and 21, unto him be glory in the church by Jesus Christ throughout all ages, age without end. Revelation chapter 11, 15 and following. Speaking of the time in which the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ, and he, that is the Father, shall rule forever and forever. Gregory Beale says that expression in the Greek is the most powerful expression in the Greek for endlessness. It's the same basic construction as in Ephesians chapter 3, 20 and 21. The rule of Christ on his throne has no end. Okay, did the apostles understand that? Well, according to, Emil Schurer, according to N.T. Wright, according to most modern scholars today, they agree that the Jews had a concept of 2 overpowering ages. Now, we could modify that ever so slightly. The Jews actually believed that there was an age before the age of Moses and the law. Okay? And I haven't pointed that out enough, by the way. But they believed overall in a 2-age concept. The age of Moses and the law and the age of Messiah and the new covenant. And I developed this in my book, The Last Days Identified, by the way. They believed that the age of Moses and the law was supposed to come to an end. They believed that the age of Messiah and the new covenant would never end. Period. Full stop. End of story. Now, Somebody might say, well, the Jews, they misunderstood tons of stuff. Well, that's true. Does that automatically mean and demand that they misunderstood the concept of the ages? No, 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 no. I've already shared with you scriptures, Old Testament and New. They were right that the Messianic age would have no end. Now, unless the apostles were dumber than a box of rocks about the concept of the ages and the duration of the age to come, the age of Messiah and the new covenant, then they were not in any way thinking about the end of the new covenant age, the end of Messiah's rule in Matthew 24, when they asked Jesus about the sign of the end of the age. It is the most humongous presuppositional, assumptive claim to believe and to say and to assert. The apostles were confused. They wrongly believed. They wrongly linked the destruction of that temple with the end of the Christian age, the end of time. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible does not teach an end of time. It certainly does not teach that that temple represented or symbolized the end of the Christian age. Once again, there is a total theological, ideological, total disconnect between the age that the temple represented and the Christian age. You cannot have the apostles. You simply cannot have the apostles connecting that old covenant temple with the destruction or the end of the old covenant age. And by the way, or the new covenant age, excuse me, you can't have that. Furthermore, if you're going to say the apostles were linking the fall of that temple with the destruction at the end of the age or the end of the new covenant age, you are thereby positing that they were thinking about, the end of the new covenant temple. Seriously? How would the destruction of the old covenant temple symbolize the destruction of the new covenant temple, which has no end? Hey, I'm out of time. By the way, today is the very last day. Take advantage of my October 2023 U.S. orders only 2-book special, Circumcision in the New Creation, Marrying and Giving in Marriage in the New Creation ? Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Click on the banner at the top. Save yourselves $10 by ordering the 2 books. You'll be glad you did. Now then, I haven't received my inventory yet, but tomorrow is the official, quote, release day for my brand new book, Resurrection Feast Fulfilled. A study of the relationship between Israel's last feast day, Sukkot, and the resurrection. I'm just over the hill, over the moon excited, okay? So tomorrow, you'll be able to order the book. It may be actually a pre-order at this particular point, unless my shipment comes in. Haven't been to the mail yet. But anyway, be looking for it. I know you're excited about it. I am thrilled beyond words about it. I'll see you tomorrow.